Hey everyone, today we're bringing you another boss preview from the 5.2 PTR. This is Jin'rokh, the first boss in the Throne of Thunder instance. The most important ability of this boss, and the one that the whole fight revolves around, is called Conductive Waters. This is a void zone that Jin'rokh creates 4 times during the fight. The first time is about 30 seconds after the start of the fight, and after that it's every 1.5 minutes. The important thing to remember about these void zones right off the bat is that each of them is initially beneficial to you, but after a while, the boss compromises it, making it harmful. And as we're going to see, these void zones will eventually take up the entire space in the room, meaning that you will run out of space, and this constitutes a soft enrage timer. To create these void zones, Jin'rokh picks up the current tank and throws him at one of the 4 Mogu statues that are located around the room, breaking the statue and creating the void zone in the process. The void zone's size increases over time until it ends up covering exactly 1/4 of the room. Any players who stand inside the void zone do increased damage and healing, and this is pretty much mandatory if you're going to kill the boss in time. As a drawback, players who are standing inside the void zone have a risk of taking high nature damage. This is because the Conductive Waters transfers and amplifies the nature damage from 2 of the boss's important abilities. In short, this means that the raid must be careful to avoid getting hit by certain abilities while inside the void zone. We're going to talk about these 2 abilities in just a little bit. 1 minute after each Conductive Water void zone is created, Jin'rokh casts an ability called Lightning Storm. He goes to the center of the room and deals pretty high raid-wide damage for 15 seconds. Doing so also compromises the Conductive Water void zone for the remainder of the encounter. As you can see, the void zone is now covered in lightning, and anyone who stands inside it takes quite massive damage. This cycle of spawning a void zone and then destroying it later on with Lightning Storm continues until all 4 statues are broken. So this means that after about 6 or 7 minutes, the entire room should be covered in damaging void zones that you cannot stand in and that you're going to wipe. On the attempts that we had, there were ways of standing outside the void zones even well past the 7-minute mark, but we imagine this is not intended. Now obviously, in addition to this void zone mechanic, there are other important abilities in the fight, and we're going to take a quick look at them. The most important of them is called Focused Lightning. Jin'rokh creates an orb of lightning that fixates on a random ranged raid member and travels towards them. You can't really kite it because it's really fast. When the orb reaches its target, it explodes and deals about 150,000 nature damage to all players within 5 yards. After exploding, the orb leaves behind a lightning fissure, which is essentially just a small lightning on the ground which deals damage every second to players very close to it. The most important thing about the Focused Lightning, however, is that if the orb explodes inside a void zone, it effectively one-shots everyone who's standing in the void zone. Simply put, what this means is that whoever's targeted by the Focused Lightning needs to move out of the Conductive Waters void zone immediately and basically kite the orb to a safe location. There are certain other interactions with the lightning fissure, namely that if a Conductive Waters void zone eventually expands and reaches the lightning fissure, it's going to destroy the lightning fissure and deal 75,000 nature damage to players inside the void zone. Additionally, if a player kites a focused lightning over an existing lightning fissure, this deals 200,000 nature damage to the entire raid. This is all secondary, however, because as we mentioned, the most important thing is to make sure that the focused lightning never explodes inside the void zone. As you could imagine, there is a stacking tank debuff which requires a tank switch, but most importantly, tanks who are affected by this debuff cannot stand in the Conductive Waters void zones because the damage from their debuff will be amplified and transmitted to all other players in the void zone. This is indeed the second of the 2 mechanics I mentioned earlier that interact with the void zones and that can damage the entire raid. There's one more ability that I want to talk about. It's called Thundering Throw, and this is the ability that Jin'rokh uses to throw the tank at a Mogu statue and create a Conductive Waters void zone. The only interesting thing about this ability is that it appears that you can control which of the Mogu statues will become the void zone, because Jin'rokh seems to always throw the tank at the statue that is directly behind the tank. Overall though, the fight is, as we said, pretty simple, and we imagine that once you have working boss mod timers that allow you to keep track of the abilities, it's going to be quite easy to execute. This of course says nothing about the tuning of the damage or the health of the boss, which could both turn out to be problematic. As you can see, we didn't manage to actually kill the boss, and on our best attempt we got him to 12%. This might be due to the tuning, but our DPS was also lower than it should be, I suspect. Regarding difficulty, however, it's important to note that on the PTR for testing this boss, the gear levels were scaled up and down respectively to 502. So character copies that were over-gearing this encounter were scaled down to what Blizzard presumably deems to be a reasonable item level to be attempting this boss at. It remains, of course, to be seen what the actual tuning will be like on Live Realms. There really isn't very much more to say about the fight at this stage, so we're just going to leave you with the raw footage until we wipe. In case it hasn't become obvious until now, this video is not meant to be a guide for this boss, but rather a preview or a first look. As we come closer to the release of patch 5.2, we're going to make sure to release a proper guide for this boss, both in written format and video format. Right now in the video you can see something that I was talking about earlier. We've already had 4 Conductive Waters Void Zones spawn and become compromised, so the floor of the room should, I think, be completely covered. But despite this fact, we're still able to stand outside of all of the Void Zones. It seems that at this point you can just sit there and DPS the boss and just survive through the lightning storms. I imagine that there must be a hard enrage timer at some stage, and like I said earlier, I don't think that standing in such a position should be possible. I don't think that it's going to make it to live servers. Anyway, thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it and you found something useful. We're going to be bringing you more PTR videos and of course more Live Realm videos in the future. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to be notified of these new videos.